Today, I am bringing you a new installment of my Country Cemetery video tour series. This is a series that you all asked for, and I have loved being able to bring that to you. Today, we are in Pikeville, Kentucky, and not only is this a country cemetery, but there's a lot of history in here too, a lot of history from the Hatfield-McCoy feud. We will visit the grave of a few Hatfields, one of the principal players of the McCoy side of things, and even a colonel as well. There is a lot of history associated with this cemetery. Today we are in Dill's Cemetery in Pikeville, Kentucky. Today we are in Pikeville, Kentucky, visiting Dill's Cemetery, and I just want to start off by a little plaque that is on the other side of the road leading up to the cemetery, highlighting the Hatfield and McCoy feud. We are definitely in Hatfield-McCoy country, and there's a lot of information to unpack in this particular cemetery. I'm glad to be here. You will see a sign leading up to Dill's Cemetery that says McCoy Family Grave Site. Also, here is a historical marker, a little stone here that tells all about Dill's Cemetery, and this is a property that was purchased by Colonel John Dills, and he is actually buried in this cemetery. We're going to be visiting his grave. I'm also going to be telling a little bit about some of those that we visit, as well as give you some general landscape and look at some of the stones in this cemetery. Now you will see we are on a hill, and you can see it slopes, goes down both sides. From what I was reading, what I researched, this is about 2 acres, and the best that we can tell, historians and all of that say that there are about 500 burials in this very small piece of property. There is another sign here that tells a little bit about Dill's Cemetery. Dill's Cemetery was founded in 1871, and there is a lot of history here outside of the Hatfield-McCoy situation. Dill's Cemetery is believed to be the first cemetery in eastern Kentucky to have both white and African American burials. And if you think about this, this is 1871, so very forward thinking for this time period. So I definitely wanted to mention that. There's also a stone in here, or a marker I should say, that tells a little bit more about that. We're looking at the grave of Basil and Martha Hatfield. Just a little bit of ties to the Hatfield family here, mostly McCoy stuff here. But the best that I can tell, based on my research, Basil Hatfield was actually the nephew of Anderson Hatfield. There were 2 Anderson Hatfields. The one that we all know about and hear about through the Hatfield-McCoy feud is Devil Anse Hatfield. Devil Anse had a cousin that they called Preacher Anse. So you had Preacher Anse, you had Devil Anse. Basil, but the best I can tell, was the nephew of Preacher Anse Hatfield. This was pretty much our only tie to the Hatfield family, but when it comes to the McCoys, we're going to visit later some of the primary players in that feud. We're on top of the hill here by Basil's grave looking down. It was kind of hidden a little bit behind these trees, and this is just a very primitive cemetery. Most of the markers don't even have names on them. But what I do want to look at here is this plaque that I mentioned before. These are the names of the known African American burials within the cemetery. And the Historical Society, or whoever it was in charge of this, has put this plaque up to tell a little bit more about those and at least mention the names. You can see some of the names there: Aggie Justice, William Henry Lane, and from what I'm gathering, the research still continues. And you'll see right there some gates around a plot. We're going to be visiting that plot shortly here at Dill's Cemetery in Pikeville. You know, after weeks of gloomy weather, it is great to be out on a sunshiny day here at Dill's Cemetery in Pikeville, Kentucky. A lot of history here and some things that I even learned here as well. So it's great to be able to be out and about today and, you know, back in the cemetery doing what I do, making these videos. Thank you all for watching. We're going to go ahead and take a few more looks at Dill's Cemetery, but I just wanted to stop. Thank you all. We crossed 12,000 subscribers, and that means the world to me. So I really appreciate all 12,000 of you coming along. If this is your first time visiting my channel, please subscribe and join with us. We have a lot of fun here visiting the graves, the cemeteries, looking at the history of those that I visit. So again, glad to be out and about in Pikeville, Kentucky at Dills Cemetery. Now, I had previously mentioned the fencing that was around a plot. This is the plot that I was talking about, the grave of Randolph and Sarah McCoy, which Randolph was also known as Randall. Randall McCoy was the father and the leader of the McCoy side of things in the Hatfield-McCoy feud. Very historical grave here in Dills Cemetery. The Hatfields and McCoys, still a feud that is talked about even to this day. I want to take a larger view here of the plot so you can see that, and I also want to visit the grave in this same plot just to the left, Rosanna McCoy. She was the one that married the son of Devilance Hatfield, Jonesy Hatfield. So you had a daughter and a son from different sides of the feud there, getting together, marrying each other, which I would say that created for some bad feelings on both sides. So we're looking back up towards the knoll there, the top of the hill. We're going to be visiting that in just a moment. You'll see right there pointing us in the direction of Colonel John Dills and Sam and Martha McCoy, that gravesite. We are going to go down and visit the grave of Sam and Martha McCoy first. Sam was a son of Randall McCoy. We just visited the grave of his father and his sister, so we're going to visit his grave right now. Sam McCoy was the son of Randall McCoy, the leader of the McCoy side of things in the Hatfield and McCoy feud. And I'm also going to pan up and show you the top of the hill. I don't know if this translates well on video or not, but that is a pretty good slope going up that hill. And as I have mentioned in these country cemetery tours before, a lot of these are on top of a hill, kind of away from the rest. At that time, I'm sure it would have been the farm. And that is something that I always like to highlight because it is just so unique to this particular area. And again, I want to show you some more of these stones. All those there, most of those were unmarked. So, you know, they were people too. So I always like to acknowledge that whenever I see that in a cemetery. We're going to be going up these steps here in just a moment. If you notice right to the right, I'm going to take a closer look at this now. There's a stone that has been taken over by that tree. And I see that a lot in these old cemeteries where, you know, a tree will grow and the roots will take over. Kind of sad. I always like to show those to kind of show you the landscape and what you can see here. We're back on top of the hill now, and we up those steps I showed you just a moment ago, and right now we're going to be visiting the grave of Colonel John Dills. This was his farm. This is property that he set aside for this cemetery. So Colonel John Dills, and Colonel Dills was a colonel for the Union Army. So this cemetery it all goes back to him because he was the one that owned it and the one who started it. And from what I read, he actually reserved the top of this hill for himself and his family for burial. And we're going to take a closer look at his stone. Born 1818, died in 1895. Colonel John Dills, Colonel for the Union Army. And I want to look back to the top of this hill. It's very beautiful up here, and if you look back, you will actually see the city of Pikeville. And this cemetery, you can tell it was just set aside, and the world has kind of grown up around it. Definitely a lot different than what it would have looked like when this cemetery was founded. If you want to pause right here, you can read a little bit more about this, but I do want to thank you all for watching. Thank you for joining me on this latest installment of my country cemetery tour videos. I always like to let you know where you can find me. Facebook, Instagram, merchandise. I am going to leave a link in the description to all those. I would love to hear from you. If you've not subscribed, please subscribe and join me on my journeys. We are over 12,000 strong, And I love having you come along with me as I visit the famous graves, the not so famous graves, the country cemeteries, and just give you a channel who will give you 100% cemetery content. Thank you all again for watching. Please join me. I will see you again soon.